Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's annual meeting session. My name is Ali Land, and I'm the Deputy Project Manager working with BJA's Body-Worn Camera Training and Technical Assistance Program. As a reminder, points of view or opinions expressed herein do not necessarily represent the official position or policies of the U.S. Department of Justice. And I will now pass it off to Damon Mosler, former San Diego County Deputy District Attorney, to begin the session, promising practices, lessons learned, and advancements in the use of body-worn cameras by prosecutors. Damon?
Thank you, Ali. The pleasure to be with everybody today. I'm going to encourage people to ask questions. You can learn from these great panelists by picking their brains and trying to figure out things that they've learned from how they handle the videos now, why they do that, because they've learned lessons, and then what they're looking to do and how they're making better use of the videos, not only in court, but in their own offices. I'm going to have each of the panelists introduce themselves. The first one is Jason Lustig from Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office.
Thanks, Damon. Good morning, everybody. I'm Jason Lustig. I've been a deputy DA in LA County for just over 34 years now. Went really fast. Never really seemed like a job. I've been working with the Body Camera Project since LAPD launched in 2015. I was kind of the point person in the LA County DA's office to coordinate the training and the rollout of evidence.com. And now I've been working with BJA for about a year and a half as a subject matter expert, and I've had the privilege to work with a number of agencies around the country. It's been a great learning experience for me, and I've enjoyed the whole process.
Thank you, Jason. I'll turn it over to Amy Tollickson from the Orange County District Attorney's Office.
Thanks, Damon. My name's Amy Tollickson. I've been with the Orange County District Attorney's Office for almost 17 years now. I was involved in the initial onboarding of body-worn cameras in our jurisdiction. And then I left the position for a bit to go try cases using body-worn cameras. So that was a good experience for me. And now I'm back in this position. Our office has decided to dedicate a full-time attorney to coordinating the body-worn camera and digital evidence in our jurisdiction. We do have 38 different agencies that we work with. So the body cam coordination and keeping everything in line and organized can be quite overwhelming. Happy to be here and happy to share whatever I can.
Thanks. Now we'll go over to the East Coast. We get a representative from New York from the Monroe County District Attorney's Office, Mark Monahan.
Hi, everybody. I've been with the Monroe County DA's office for about 20 years, since '02, last 5 in an administrative role, which includes trying to help our ADAs get a hold of the body-worn camera from the 14 law enforcement agencies that we have in Monroe County, which constitutes about 800 members who are actually with a unit on them. So we're a relatively small office compared to some of the people on the program. We have about 750,000 in our metro area, and our office has about 78 ADAs, but we only have about 2 people who are responsible for getting body-worn camera from the police. So it's been challenging, especially since we had some discovery reform in 2020. So, but I'm glad to be with y'all, and I hope to pick up some things myself.
Thank you, Mark. So I'm going to ask each of you, briefly, you've kind of said that already, but how many agencies submit cases to you? And when do those agencies first get the cameras? And at this point, what percentage of your cases have BWC videos on it? I know that I'm from San Diego, and 100% of our cases, other than perhaps Fish and Game and some of the really small agencies, have videos. So every single case in San Diego County has a body camera video, and we deal with it in a certain way. But Jason, why don't you lead us off with that? Because I know Los Angeles has quite a few agencies.
Yes, in Los Angeles County, we have 48 agencies. 2 biggest agencies, of course, are the LA Sheriffs and the Los Angeles Police Department. Of those 48 agencies, there are approximately 40 agencies that are sending body camera video to us. Not all of those agencies are using the same system, which causes challenges. And, you know, of the cases that we get, I mean, a very high percentage have body camera video associated with them, which is overwhelming our deputy DAs. We're normally staffed at over 1,000 deputy DAs in LA County. We're down to about 200. So we're really kind of sucking wind with everything, including the onslaught of body camera video.
You say you're down by 200, not down to 200.
Sorry, down by 200 to 800.
Thanks. Amy, you mentioned 38 agencies in Orange County. Do they all have cameras?
We have 22 agencies with cameras. All of our major agencies have cameras at this point. We have about 4 smaller but mainstream agencies that aren't on body cams yet, but have plans to be on those cameras probably by the end of next year. We have 4,000 individual cameras running in Orange County at last count. Each of our officers has their own camera. So that's quite a bit of evidence that we need to ingest. But I would say the vast majority of our cases have body worn camera at this point.
And Mark, how does it look in Monroe County?
You utilize body worn cameras. One's the University of Rochester, so it's relatively small. The other is one of our towns, which is a pretty good sized town. It's 110,000 people in it. They have not. The first agency to go up on them was the Rochester Police Department, and I believe that was in 14. So we got used to them. It's been the onboarding of the others that's been a little bit more challenging because they're not as large. They don't have the same kind of capacity for staffing essential positions to get us the footage. So I would say virtually every case in those jurisdictions where they have it, we have at least one, usually multiples. And that's some of the challenges that we may be getting into in the program when we have more than one agency responding. Who's the person that's going to be the point person? Who's going to quarterback, making sure you have everything?
So Amy, I want to ask you, how do you currently get your videos, and at what time in the case do you see the videos, or do your deputy DAs have access to the videos? And how difficult has that been to make it the way it is right now?
So we have a pretty robust program in Orange County. I am involved, my unit is involved in training every single officer in Orange County on body worn cameras. I have a very close relationship with the individuals at each jurisdiction that are responsible for getting me the cameras, getting us the video. And we do a lot of meetings quarterly and sometimes weekly, depending on if there's questions or whatever. In order to get all those videos to us. We primarily use cloud-based sharing. The vendor that we've chosen is evidence.com at this point. And we've come up with some pretty creative ways to get those videos, even WatchGuard videos, through that environment by opening up, paying for and opening up temporary portals for the agencies to transfer digital evidence to us so that we can receive it in our environment. We have 5 agencies doing that right now, and it's been extremely successful.
And prior to that, were you receiving discs from those agencies, and that was a burden to your department, and that's why you're paying for that other service?
So more than discs, we would receive flash drives, thumb drives. And while we have giant disc copiers in the office, we don't have automatic thumb drive copiers. So the thumb drives were actually extremely overwhelming. And then it's just very expensive to everybody involved to share and constantly ingest thumb drives.
And Mark, how does that work? I know that at least with your major agency, I know it's on a certain platform you're used to, but with all the agencies there, how are your DAs getting their videos, and are they getting them timely?
I'd say for the most part, they are. The smaller agencies, it can be difficult just because they don't have a full-time person devoted for the purposes of getting us the body worn camera. But we've, because of our size, have had to really emphasize with the police agencies, it's up to them to provide it to us. Our DA sent a letter when discovery reform occurred January 1st of 2020, letting them know that it's their obligation, it's their case, they have to provide it to us because we simply don't have the staff to go into each case and find it ourselves. And that's been pretty effective, I would say. We have different platforms being used. There's evidence.com, we have Axion being used, GTAC, there's C3 Sentinel, which everybody who works here in the tech unit has had to become familiar with, because in order to explain it to the person in their department, our people need to know the system too. Occasionally the people at the department aren't really eager to be in the role they're in, and they haven't gotten sufficient training, or they weren't interested in it when they got it. And so that can be an obstacle for us.
Jason, with so many agencies submitting cases to you on different platforms and so many different branch offices, is LA County District Attorney's Office getting the videos that they want, and how's that working?
For the most part, we're getting the videos that we want, at least some of them. So how it works in LA County, we now went up and running with an electronic case submission process. So detectives can actually electronically send police reports and a limited number of photos for our filing deputies to review for filing. But the body camera videos come separately, either by way of evidence.com, another system like WatchGuard, or through the physical media. But here's a major problem that just came up, is that when the cases come over from one of our larger agencies, I won't name it, one of the big ones, one of the top three, we're not getting all of the videos that are associated with the particular incident. And part of the reason is the video sharing has been left up to the individual detectives. Some detectives are better with technology than others. So, you've got the entry-level detectives that are good at sending us the videos for the names that are in the police report, for the deputies or the officers that responded to a particular incident, but they're not looking further to the backup personnel that came. So we found that on 8,000 cases that were submitted to us, we did not get all the videos on those cases, and that has resulted in a real administrative headache. So I think the lesson learned from there is agencies really can't depend on individual detectives to work these evidence management systems. You really have to have specialists now. The systems are great. They have tons of features that really work, but you need to have skills to operate the systems. So that's kind of my mantra, is you need experts to do this evidence sharing.
Well, and that takes to the thought, and I know that you and I've had that conversation, but not only not having a badge, but having someone who's civilian is beneficial, because they're likely to not promote, transfer, or retire nearly as fast as somebody with a badge. And so there's a benefit if an agency can afford to do that, have that type of personnel do that, and there's probably more pride in what they're doing, not to disrespect any law enforcement officers, but that's an ancillary duty to law enforcement. It would not be for somebody else. And I know as a prosecutor, we're very concerned about getting all the videos and making sure of that, and understanding their workflow and ours. So thank you, Jason. I appreciate you bringing that up. What would you say, all three of you, what would you say was the biggest hurdle, and how did you overcome it from the 2014 deployment? Because I think we all got cameras around then, and where you've evolved to this point. So that way these newer agencies coming aboard can realize maybe we can avoid these small pitfalls or bigger ones and start at a higher level. And sorry to put you on the spot, Mark. I'm going to put you up first. Unmute, and we're good to go.
Well, I think the hardest part was convincing the agencies that they really need to provide it to us, because they weren't used to doing that. In New York, when our discovery law changed, it changed everything. It's linked to our ability to announce readiness for trial. And if we're not ready for trial, the case is going to be dismissed under speedy trial grounds. So the legislature, when they did that, provided us the opportunity to tell the agencies, all right, now if you don't do it, we're going to lose your case. Your case is going to be dismissed because one of your guys didn't tag their video properly, and it was off in the ether, unknown to us, and unknown to maybe the administrative sergeant who was supposed to send it along. So that heavy hand of the legislature, although it's making our lives miserable, allowed us to put the blame on them. And I think it lit a fire under some of them. They're not joking. They really need to get this stuff. And some have taken it more seriously than others, but most have taken it very seriously.
And Jason, for you in LA.
Right. So really the challenge with the rollout of our large agencies. And the challenge that really persisted today is basic things like the numbering of the cases when they get shared in the system. For instance, give you an example, I hate to lay them out, but LAPD uses two numbers to number their cases. One's an incident number and one's what they call a DR number. And we are still getting cases shared that use one number or another. And that causes our deputy DAs headaches in trying to find the cases. So really working out the nuts and bolts with the prosecutors before the agency goes up and running is the best way to have a smooth operating system. So, the method of sharing, are they going to share with us via download link or a partner agency share? Which option do they choose in the system? Do they choose an individual prosecutor's name, or do they choose one of our branch offices? All those kind of minutia wind up playing out in the day in and day out lives of our DAs.
And Amy, I know that you in Orange County over the years have evolved in terms of being able to do outreach and work with that. Why don't you go ahead and tell us some of the issues with respect to the beginnings in Orange County, and then how you solved it with the regional approach in terms of meetings and education?
So in Orange County, we did get cameras in the county in 2014, but I don't think we as an office really realized it until 2015. And then we had like 5 or 6 agencies that basically said, hey, we're signing these contracts and getting the hardware next week. And luckily, our administration saw that as just an overwhelming amount of discovery that was about to hit us, and designated some process people to that project immediately. So we, from almost the very beginning, developed a very robust tagging and sharing system that we require from our agencies. Now in California, especially Orange County, it has always been the agency's responsibility to get it to us. And it has always been our position at the DA's office that we're not going to go digging through your system to look for the evidence that you need to provide for us. So we don't have login credentials to the agency's systems or environments. We have our own environment that they share into, and they need to get us the video over to us. A huge help in doing that is CAD integration. So as soon as the agencies were able to do that, that was a game changer. All we had to do was really change the culture of the police officers who, if they were kind of ancillary police officers on scene, they wouldn't place themselves on the call because they wanted to stay available for other calls. So between the dispatchers and the officers, there had to be a culture shift where the officers would place themselves on the call so that the CAD would tag their body cams properly. But then the dispatchers would need to know that they were free for a call. And that was kind of, they were on it, but not really if they needed to take something. So that was just a shift in culture. And the way that we really kind of forced that was showing the agencies how to insist that their officers tag their own videos if they have not been tagged. So weekly, the officers would get emails from their supervisors saying, you have, 100 untagged videos. Hope you have a free Saturday because, that's your responsibility to go in and tag them. Once the officers did that a few times, they were placing themselves on call, and the CAD integration has been super helpful. But on that note, the hardware companies in this arena are really a ready, fire, aim situation. The hardware company, the body cam itself, they're only thinking about it from a law enforcement perspective. And it's really important that as prosecutors and law enforcement agencies that we force them to think about the system as a whole. Because as we're getting more and more technology, there's a lot of can and should decisions that we are all used to making. We use a lot of discretion in this profession, but the hardware builders and the software builders, especially on the body cam side of things, aren't thinking about those things at all. So it's really important to stay active in communication with the representatives from these companies to explain to them what they're doing to the practice of law, criminal law, when they institute some of these things.
Mark, if you could, with respect to your office and the cases you receive from your agencies, whether it be the officer-driven videos or the use of videos by your DAs, what are some of the innovative, positive ways that you've seen the videos used, or positive things law enforcement's done that you've been able to let them know about to improve their taping and their performance?
Well, from the time that they went live in 2014 to now, it's remarkable how good the police have gotten compared to how bad they were when they first got body-worn camera. They were just saying things that they shouldn't have been saying, things that were, I mean, I understand that there's sort of a gallows kind of humor among prosecutors and among cops, but a juror who's going to see that footage is not going to appreciate it in the same way it was intended. So they've gotten much, much better at doing that. Our ADAs are using it quite a bit to show like a comparison side by side on screens with a map of our scene, with the actual ground level view of what the officer was seeing. And sometimes if we have surveillance footage from say a traffic cam, or one of the local bodegas has one running, we can show the officer as they're approaching and showing the surveillance video side by side, and sometimes triple screen with the overview of where the parties are in relation. And it gives it gives great illustration to the trier of fact about how the things happened and how it was viewed by the officer. Can be really helpful for probable cause hearings, suppression hearings. It's sometimes hard to get officers to articulate things that they know for themselves, that they were there for. To put it into words can be difficult, and body-worn cameras giving them the ability to do it. But when they can do side-by-sides, it's been extremely helpful. Also locating evidence that an officer remembers was there, but somehow didn't get picked up or didn't get seen by another officer. It can be demonstrated to them in hearing or trial prep. Like, look over here next to the gray car, there's the casing that he saw that you didn't. That's been pretty helpful too.
Fantastic. Amy, same question to you in terms of law enforcement positive outcomes, and then the use of, circle back with the DA's office, positive outcomes.
So again, we've been really lucky in Orange County. I'm invited in to train every single officer that receives a body cam. And that's extremely helpful from the prosecution perspective to show them how we use it in trial. I teach my officers that basically what we do in trial is we teach the jurors why we believe that this individual is guilty. And so I ask the officers to use their body cam really as a teaching tool and speak to their body-worn camera as they're going. It's so much easier to have the officer articulating parts of his investigation to the body cam as he goes through it. I just have to press play then when we're in court. The idea that an officer might have started to smell alcohol at the hip of a vehicle on a DUI arrest is so powerful when that's said on the body cam as it's happening. So that's kind of the creative way that we really encourage the officers to do that in Orange County. And again, then the DAs can just press play and really teach the jurors why it is that we came to the conclusion that we did and why they should come to that same conclusion. We do a lot of side-by-sides. We're getting a little bit more creative with clips and still shots and transcripts, overlaying transcripts on the video. All of those things just help bring it home to the jurors. And then also we teach, the officers very specifically that they may have to explain that the body cam doesn't catch everything, and that they should be very comfortable with the fact that the body cam doesn't catch everything that happens on a scene, and that's okay. We'll explain that to the jurors. And, as long as we know all of the pitfalls, most of the things we can explain to jurors, even when it comes down to human responses on the body cam that may be, unprofessional, but if we know about them, we can usually handle it.
And Jason, from your perspective and what you've observed, both as a subject matter expert, but also in your particular agency.
Right. So, I mean, the obvious benefits of the cameras in terms of making case decisions one way or another play out in real life, of course. But the one way I take advantage of the videos when I see them is when I see officers that maybe need some training on some issue, like how do you really get consent to search a car, and issues like that, that I can call the officer offline rather than putting things in writing and writing memos and emails. It gives me an ability to call the officer offline and go, hey, if you want to come by my office, I'd really like to go over with you, what happened in this video. So hopefully, the next time around, it'll be a little cleaner experience. And I think it helps to, of course, improve the police officers' actions in the field, but it also starts to engender trust further between the officers and the prosecutors that, hey, we're not out there to get you. And, as you can imagine in this day and age, especially in LA County, there's a little bit of feeling among law enforcement that the prosecutor is kind of out to get them. So it's a way to kind of, continue to establish and foster a good relationship.
That leads me to thinking in terms of, all three of you mentioned, sometimes we see things in policing, and policing isn't always pretty, and that's just the nature of it. We see some colorful language or other activity. And Jason, you talked about individually talking, but do any of your offices have a set policy or a process in place to do two things? One, to try to modify not actual behavior, but then what do you do when you do find actual behavior? Because I know that we as prosecutors don't want to be the internal affairs division, but law enforcement needs to know things because we can't have bad conduct in these cases. So I'll start with Amy on this one, but do you have a set policy or process in place for reporting or modifying that type of thing?
So we don't have a set policy. That being said, because our office has always designated a prosecutor to the body-worn camera project, I find at least that I get a lot of those calls. And as somebody with 17 years experience, which isn't as much, I'm sure, well, as Jason, for sure, I'm about halfway there. After 17 years, you have a little better ability to talk to officers, a little more finesse if you need to go higher in their organization to handle things. But and then if it comes down to, serious violations, we definitely have a process for that. We have a whole unit designated to Brady violations and things like that we can report things to. But having a designated prosecutor, at least as a contact for the office and the agencies, even if that person is just routing calls, is very effective.
So yeah, in the DA's office, we also have a Brady unit. And what I have made an effort when I do the body camera training, I haven't done it in a while, when I was doing it some years ago, is to tell our DAs that if they see something in the video that they believe contradicts something in the police report or officer's statement, don't panic. Give an opportunity to take the opportunity to talk to your supervisor, go over what you may have found, give the opportunity for the officer to come in and go, hey, we're seeing this, you wrote this, is there some explanation? Because the bottom line is, before making knee-jerk reactions that officers are lying based on potentially contradictory video evidence, take a breath and don't panic and go over it before you think you need to report something up our chain of command, which pretty much anything that gets reported up our chain of command in our office will wind up in our Brady system, and the officer will have an entry about some inconsistent statement that they made in the past. So I try to have people pump the brakes and make sure they vet it before they report it. But we do have a reporting system. Sometimes there are, actual misconduct that's uncovered, and it needs to be reported.
And Mark, how about up there in Monroe County?
Well, if we have a dismissal that was based upon some sort of problematic testimony, in all likelihood, the judge is going to make a ruling that's going to make the decision for us that they didn't find the witness's testimony to be credible, and that's going to be the subject of a notice for all future cases that person's on. So that makes it easy. We also have those situations where the officer, it may not be their language, but they may catch somebody that didn't intend to on their body worn camera. There might be a CI that they didn't want to burn and they did. So it's really important in our major felony unit that we're doing a review of every piece of footage we have to make sure something didn't get scooped that we didn't intend to, so we can do a protective order and then make decisions on whether or not this case is the one we want to burn the CI on. As far as the off-color stuff, those can be the subject of conversations with supervisors, you know, the kind of things that Jason was talking about offline, that you don't want to, you want to give somebody the benefit of the doubt. You know, maybe they were harsh, maybe they were accusatory without needing to be. And it might be a teaching moment instead of one that has to be in a notice. Those are easier. Those are easier to just do. Sorry, you made a mistake that we can't deal with in a more informal way.
By way of contrast, in San Diego, we actually have a policy that I was able to implement when I was running the camera program. And my concern was because we had so many younger DAs coming into the system, I may have referenced them as indoor children, that hearing colorful language during a particular stop, though may be particularly useful to gain compliance, expressing a sense of urgency, that those people want to report that immediately to a supervisor and to the Brady committee. So we changed that. We instilled a tap the brakes type system where they have to report it to their supervisor, who then meets with the executive team and decides where it goes from there, because we didn't want to have younger DAs automatically reaching out to law enforcement, because you may get the wrong sergeant who has a thing for this officer when the officer was completely in the right. So I think that's something that, particularly if you are law enforcement listening in, have those conversations with your DA's office early on. They may not be thinking about these issues, and it's good for them to have hopefully a point person, even if it's not staffed permanently like Amy, but as an ancillary duty like Jason and Mark as a supervisor, to be able to have that conversation about what's going to happen with that, because I think we don't want to have people get in trouble for something they shouldn't have. Which leads me to kind of the next area in terms of law enforcement policy. I know that when grants are given, law enforcement is supposed to have a policy. They're supposed to consult with the DA's office that they've are getting cameras. But in terms of actual review of law enforcement policy, do any of you consistently do that in your roles of camera supervisor, or is it more kind of you trust law enforcement, you don't want to look at all their policy, but then comment later if you find things about their policy? And Jason, I'll start with you.
So just anecdotally, when LAPD rolled out their system in 2015, they gave us a copy of their policy to review, and unfortunately only gave us a 48-hour turnaround and basically issued it within 24 hours. So we didn't really have a chance to review LAPD's policy. And I think they have a great policy, so I don't have any complaints. But the sheriffs, on the other hand, did give us an opportunity to review their policy way beforehand to make our comments and thoughts and take our input. Other agencies is ad hoc. We have 48 agencies. Some of them take advantage of us and will let us look at their policy before they issue them, and other ones, just do it. And, Orange County, I got to give Amy's county a tip of the hat. They really have an organized process where they have meetings every few months with all of their agencies and discuss these issues of concern with regard to body cameras and technology. In LA County, unfortunately, we don't do that. They haven't designated someone like Amy to be full-time on this to organize all of our agencies. And that's something, again, that I would, if the people that are listening would take back to their counties, is they should be doing these group meetings to all get on the same page. It seems so logical, but everybody gets caught up with their day in and day out duties and putting out their individual fires that people don't look at the big picture and take that extra effort. And I think in Orange County, it's really paid off.
Mark, how about yourself in your office?
I think, again, the Rochester Police Department were the first to go forward, and they were well ahead of everyone else. And I think everybody else kind of took their cues from them, and their policies have been very similar to the RPD. So that's been kind of nice. We've had some predictability in what you can expect to be on a video and the things you wouldn't catch on a video. So RPD, I think, was really receptive when they were discussing retention times. They have retention time purposes that are completely different than ours, civil matters, for example, or internal matters. But they were very receptive to our input and feedback based on classification of crimes all the way up to homicides. And they pushed some out further than they wanted to, knowing that the expense was going to be there for storing. But we felt like we had been listened to, and that was a great experience for us. And especially because they were the lead dog and every other dog seemed to kind of follow what they were doing. I would say the rest of it, though, what they're capturing, what they were going to activate the camera for, was really up to them. I think if in the first few months we had experienced problems like, why are you shutting off right there? That's what we need. That's what we want. We need to see the guy walking around drunk on a DUI. Then it would have, I think they would have been open. Our experience with the retention policies makes me think that it would have been an open discussion, but they erred on the side of, in my opinion, recording more than less, which that can present problems, but I'd rather have those than the ones where they're missing evidence that could make the case.
Amy, your perspective?
So in Orange County, we did. So there's kind of a balance, right? In Orange County, we weigh in on things that we really have the expertise on, which is retention. We can give some advice on retention. We can give some advice about when a camera can be turned off for legitimate law enforcement purposes, and how that affects us in trial, as long as, again, they're speaking to the camera and they're talking to the camera and letting the camera know why it is that they're turning that off. We have been in Orange County very successful with, again, having those group meetings, and instead of telling them what their policy should be, just explaining to them what it looks like in trial, if this policy is or is not in place, and what the cross-examination will look like, what the direct will look like, depending on what they're choosing. We also have the agencies really communicating amongst themselves within this group. So many of our policies are almost exact replicas of each other, because they all kind of get together and they talk. And once they realize how things go in court, the jury instructions that will be given depending on certain practices, and whether the camera was turned on or off or destroyed before trial, those types of things are very effective in just letting them know what it looks like. We're all we're all going in the same direction, right? But I do find that there's a kind of a lack of communication sometimes, and your prosecution agency does need to be willing to weigh in on the things that they have expertise on, which is how this plays out in trial. Do what you want with your policy, but this is how it looks in court.
In my experience, I've seen law enforcement and actually the district attorney's office learn from cross-examination, because the defense is going to pick on certain things because that's what they need to do to establish what they want to, but that can be an area to improve behavior or outcomes by law enforcement if we listen and pay attention, and law enforcement listens and pays attention. For example, one of our agencies, and I can honestly say that until I was in a policy review setting with the Bureau of Justice Assistance, I didn't really look at policies as a deputy DA. And as a DA, I did not notice, nor would I have even paid attention, since I never handled domestic violence cases. But San Diego Police Department instructed their officers not to record the victims after they made an arrest. And there was a privacy concern that somebody had voiced, and the chief listened to some random voice at the time. And it wasn't until the defense bar in a regular meetings that they had with their office brought this up, because they wanted those statements by the domestic violence victim in order to convince their client to accept counseling and plead and things like that. So through that cross-examination, we learned about a policy mistake, which was helpful. Other areas I know Mark mentioned, and I'll leave this out there because I have a follow-up on this, but in terms of the narration, law enforcement didn't want to narrate. They thought the camera should be static and not a part of the enforcement. But the benefits of narration are so clear that as long as it doesn't interfere with officer safety and conducting proper police investigations and procedures, the narration is essential. It helps us understand so much more, the jury to understand things, as you said, Amy, and actually just gives us a frame of mind of the officer, which is beautiful. And then there's the on-off, when to activate, when not to, and how to do that. And I know Jason has some thoughts about, you know, whether videos should always be on or not, and how that impacts us. So I'm gonna kind of leave that out there in terms of your view, Jason, on that. Then I have a follow-up about reviewing videos. Go ahead.
So there's a new feature on the major body camera manufacturers. They call it the always on feature. Maybe there's another name for it, where even when the camera is in standby mode, it is buffering inside the camera upwards of 20 hours of video, independent of any activation by the officer. So, you know, that feature really kind of revolutionizes a lot of things with the body cameras, at least in my mind, because we heard in one of the earlier sessions yesterday that activation is a big issue. And sometimes an officer fails to activate before shooting. And this always on feature would capture that. And I think people haven't quite gotten their minds around it, in that just a few years ago, we were happy if a camera had enough memory to store all the videos from an officer's shift and also have enough battery life. And if it met those two criteria, it's like, great, wow, this is amazing. We got all the videos and we got battery life. Now, all of a sudden, in a blink of an eye, the camera is capturing 20 hours of video in the background while still giving us enough videos to cover the officer shift and enough battery power. So it's a feature that at least needs to be vigorously debated within the agencies as to whether they're going to use it, because it may eliminate the need for all of these automatic activation triggers that people spend a lot of money on in order not to miss an officer-involved shooting.
Would that all be downloaded and then have to be stored and available for discovery?
Right. So that's an issue to be debated. The information that's captured day in and day out would disappear. It's a buffer. It gets written over time. And the police department would have to write a good policy as to when they can go back and capture that information. At least at a starting point, it would be anytime there's a significant use of force and the officer didn't activate the camera. That would be easy, I would think, up front, to go back, capture that information that wasn't captured because there was no activation. And then, as like Chief Moore was talking about how they're doing research on body camera videos, with this always on feature in that extra video, if for some reason they go back and they see something because they had to capture an OIS, but they also saw something 3 hours before that, and it was a perfectly good OIS. But 3 hours before the OIS, the officer made a smart-ass comment to someone, right? You would have as part of your policy that, hey, it's hands off. The only thing that video is going to be used for is to figure out what happened in this use of force situation. So you can write policy to take care of that, I think.
Well, it certainly lets us see that technology solutions may not match policy solutions and or practical use in court and by our office, given the discovery requirements we have. If either one of you want to briefly weigh in on that I know we could talk about forever. I'll leave it to Amy or Mark to chime in, but then I had one follow-up question I'd like to finish with.
In New York, it would break us because the statute, the discovery statute that's now linked to speedy trial, anything that's case related has to be turned over, and it's a very elastic term because it's supposed to be within the mindset of a defense attorney who might want to make cross-examination points. It's not what the prosecutor thinks is case related. So we would end up having to store so much maybes that it could just break us budgetarily.
And real brief, Amy, then it segues to their last question, which works out well.
Yeah, I have logistical concerns about that feature. My concern would just be preservation requests from the defense on the maybe. and our obligation once collected to preserve that. So I have a lot of, think that needs a vigorous debate in prosecution offices in your administration. And I do think that that is something that agencies should vigorously investigate and speak with and figure out how it's going to work with their prosecution agencies before they turn that feature on. It has amazing benefit. In Riverside, I know that there was 2 officers that were assassinated without turning their cameras on, and it did catch evidence for that prosecution. But the logistical nightmares of getting that video out of the hardware, because you do need to hook it up to the actual computer, and storing it, it's something that really needs to be debated.
Real quick, because that's discovery, viewing, us are reviewing things like that and having knowledge of. We have about 2 minutes left, but does your agency, does your department require their DAs to watch all the videos prior to you providing in discovery? And when do you provide it in discovery? Mark, 30 seconds.
We have to provide it within 20 days of an in custody, and we have to provide it within 35 days of an out of custody. And yes, we're required to review it all. That's the policy. Whether that's practical or not, I don't think it is anymore. We've got too much of it. It's impossible.
Thank you, Amy.
We address this head on with our defense bar, both public and private. In Orange County, we basically stipulate to a protective order. We turn it over right away without necessarily reviewing it. The protective order doesn't have any futures, like anything to rely on in the future. If the defense wants to remove that protective order, they don't need a change in circumstances, but it slows that whole process down so that if they want to remove the protective order, we can all go back and look at that body cam and make sure, because it's just overwhelming. We can't look at everything. So it's kind of a stopgap that we've just kind of have a gentleman's agreement about in Orange County, and it's been very successful. And we give it over as soon as that protective order is issued.
And Jason.
Right, in LA County, we tried to get that gentleman's agreement with our public defender's office, but that didn't happen. It didn't even come close. So what happens, we don't have a written policy. They're working on it right now to talk about specifically on body camera video. But right now, basically, the volume is such that DAs are not required to watch it before they turn over. And by and large, they are not watching it before they turn it over. So we routinely warn the police agencies that if you have something in your videos that you do not want to go to a defendant, then you have to redact it and let us know that you redacted, or you need to notify us. Otherwise, assume everything that you give us is being turned over. Now, in our units that vertically prosecute, where they have more time to look at their individual cases, they are looking at it before they turn it over, and they do redact it. But by and large, in the regular flow of cases, it's not happening.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank all 3 panelists for this lively and engaging conversation. I always enjoy learning and hearing what things are happening out there. And if people have questions later that come up, please go ahead and put it in the chat at some point in time, and I can make sure we get answers to you. With that, I'll turn it back over to Allie to segue us out into our break and over to our 11 or 2 o'clock session for most of you.